your parents pay a tutor or they themselves teach you in second grade what you're going to learn in third grade. So all throughout high school, from growing up all the way through high school, I never had to learn in school. Why? Because I learned it during summer, and my parents would teach me, or my mom would teach me. It was really mainly my mom, a tiger mom, my mom, and then and whatever tutor she got me. So in school, I basically just daydreamed, and I didn't like have to learn anything. And so I did really well in high school, and I got accepted into a top university in America, a University of Chicago. It's one of the best universities here. And once I went to university, I got my butt kicked. Okay, it was like my face hit a concrete wall, not literally, but figuratively. And what happened was I went to these classes and I was mixed with all these other smart people, and I just could not learn because I had never learned to learn. And um, and in my and I realized in order to graduate, I had to do CS and economics, and I did a dual major in 4 years. It looks good on paper, but in reality, I didn't do much more work than if I just did one major. I just found overlaps between two majors, and for econ, it was easy to just blah 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 because you know there's a few math equations, but the rest of it is you just write blah blah blah, and you can kind of pass. It's one of those courses, but CS, that's much harder to blah, 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 okay? And to give you some context, we had to write an operating system called Yalnix, okay? I don't know if you guys have to do that in school these days, but it's basically like a Unix system clone. And my partner and I, he wrote 3,000 lines of code, and I wrote 50 lines of code. And the teacher broke it up into a 10-week course. The first week, he said something like create a map or something, or like just create like the first stub. And I was able to do that. And every week he gave us a little bit of instruction exactly what to write. I understood nothing. My partner, he was smoking weed the whole time he was coding. Okay. All I did was I sat next to him. I ran the computer lab at our school. So I during off hours, we went in there. He'd smoke weed, drink, what's that, Mountain Dew. I'd be sitting there trying to code, and I comprehended nothing. Okay, that's how bad I was. But my professor asked him, hey, did your friend do enough work? And he said, yeah, he did enough. And so he let me graduate. That's how I passed my operating systems class. I had another class. It was artificial intelligence. And in that, we had to write 4 problems per week. They call them like problem sets, okay? And I could, for the first 2 of them, blah, blah, blah my way. And then the other 2, I would just not fill it out. And I know I could get a C in the class and graduate. And one night, I couldn't even do half of a problem set. Like I didn't have enough context to even blah, blah, blah the answer. And I was so scared because I'm like, God, I'm not going to graduate at this rate. So I remember going to bed and crying and then praying. And I said, God, everything I have belongs to you anyways. Okay. So this is not one of those foo-foo bargaining prayers to God. God's not a genie. Okay. And I just prayed, God, everything I have belongs to you anyways. But if you help me get a CS degree, I'll use it for your glory. Okay. So I went to bed. And then an hour later, my friend Brian Kim, who's now the chief operating officer at LifeRay, he knocked on my door, okay? And he lived 1 floor below me. So he said, hey, Brian, I got the answers from the TA. I have all 4. So I copied down 2 of them so as not to look suspicious. And that's how I passed that's how I got my CS degree. And I remember my first job as an intern in the real world now, right? Because we're talking from the university to the real world. My first teacher, basically, he said to me, Brian, import this Java class, open up a JDBC connection, do XYZ. And I did not know any of that. Just to show you how bad I was, I didn't know what an array was. I just did not know any programming. And in my CS class, I remember one time they put on a sheet of paper all the scores of everyone in the class and a number, which is your ID, so it's anonymized. And there's usually a bell curve, somebody who's really good, somebody who's in the middle, and then somebody who does poorly. And then there's an outlier. I was not even like in the bell curve. I was just in the outlier. That's how bad it was. But at my first job, I was suddenly presented with a real world problem. And when I had a real world problem, my teacher, who used to work at LifeRay, his name is Mike Kahn, I love the guy, as he was breathing down my neck, I could feel the sweat coming down my armpits because I knew nothing, right? And he figured out that I knew nothing. And from the point of where he figured out that I knew nothing, he built me back up. And he says, okay, Brian, you know just this. Okay, learn this, and learn this. And he taught me how to learn on my own. And once I learned that, my goodness, the world opened up to me. So a little about how I started LifeRay. So right after I graduated from college, you know, we all want to change the world. I didn't really want to change the world. I really wanted to by my own conviction. I just wanted to go move to some tribe and be a missionary somewhere. And I prayed about it. But a couple pastors came to me and says, no, Brian, you should go to the workforce. I don't think you should be a missionary. I'm like, okay. And when I was working, prior to this, I still went to a bunch of missions organizations just in case. And I said, okay, send me anywhere in the world. I'll go wherever you want me to go. They looked at my profile and they all said, Brian, we're not going to train you. We're not going to send you anywhere. We just want you to build our website. Okay. So this is back in 2000 at the peak of the dot-com boom. And if you don't know what that is, because you guys are too young, you guys were just born then go look it up on the internet. Okay. So I had just graduated from college when I was your age, back in the dot-com boom. And these nonprofits, these missions agencies showed me their website. And I looked at it and he said, oh, this costs $50,000 for you guys to build this. That's what they told me. And I said, wait a minute, this is just static HTML. I think I could build this in 2-3 weeks. I would just need a $3,000 laptop and I would go on vacation. And I was making, you know, less than that, you know, not much more or around the same amount as that back then. So the calculation was, well, why don't I give my life towards making software that can you know, help lots of people. And then at the same time, my pastor asked me to build a website for our church. And I calculated and I thought, it'll cost me, let's say 10 hours to help my pastor. And then if I were to help another missions agency, it would cost me 10 hours. Another missions agency, another church will cost me 10 hours, 10 hours, 10 hours. But if I spend 1,000 hours building this framework, then it may cost me 3 hours to help a church. Then at some point in time, the investment of 1,000 hours will repay itself. So that was the thing that like caught my attention. But I spent the next 4 years it was not 1,000 hours, it was 4 years building this massive framework. And this massive framework, churches did not want to use because I'd over-engineered it. They basically wanted a motorcycle. And instead, I gave them a Caterpillar earth mover. So I kind of just gave it up. And so I open sourced it. I'm like, nobody's going to want this anyways. Just give it away for free. Open sourcing LifeRay was not an intention. It was just like accidental. I open sourced it and people started using it and large companies started using it all over the world. And from that point into now, we just kept growing. We just kept focusing on providing value. And today we have, 1,000 employees. We have, offices around the world. We have several thousand clients, and that's where we are. So I think that's my time. And I wanted to see if anyone wanted to ask anything. Did I lose everyone here?
I have a question, Brian. So
yes.
when you build this framework, like how did you promote it? Because like I know that one thing is building, but actually having people to use it is another thing, right? So how did you approach that problem?
Back in the day, people did not realize this, but PostgreSQL was a much better database than MySQL. But MySQL became $1 billion payout, and PostgreSQL, like, it's still good, but like not much has been made known of it, right? And most people didn't realize, if you look at the charts of when MySQL got really popular, it was because they made a Windows installation. that was a key determining factor. It wasn't because MySQL had better features. It was because MySQL made it easier to access. And for us, everyone else had these complicated installation steps. I just made it, you unzip and you run a command. That's what I focused on. I focused on making it as easy to adopt as possible.
That's awesome.
And then just posted it on websites and then just being very dedicated on forums, etc. Now we've, as a company, as we've grown bigger, we've hit a different set of challenges. And right now as a company, we're in the midst of reinventing ourselves and going back to our roots, making it so the product is easy to use and making it so that we get early, quick feedback.
Nice.
Yeah.
Oh, I had a question too.
Yeah.
How did you get your first intern job since you are so poor in CS?
Thank you for asking that, Mateus. So what happened was I went to a good university. Everyone there is really smart, but everyone there was also really nerdy and dorky. They couldn't talk. And I had one skill set. I knew how to blah, 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 blah in front of people. So all these interviews, I just go, yeah, whatever, Javas, yeah, those classes. I never lied. I just brushed over certain things and say, hey, and talked about other stuff. So, and then the other thing related to that is, I was thinking about this when I was preparing for this talk and I forgot to mention it, is I realized that school was very poor at analyzing one specific skill set that's super marketable. Okay, think about it this way. What does school test you on? Schools test you on how smart you are. That's what it gauges you on. It never measures you on this. It never measures you on how you can make other people smart. There's no measurement for that. So what I realize is the skill set I have is I am really good at making other people really smart. So right now I'm in Brazil because I'm training a bunch of people. I'm actually training 24 to 30 people at a time. And I believe that I can train them better than Code Academy, than any of those programs. I've looked at those programs like, no, this is not the right way of doing it. I can do this better. So I'm running a curriculum, and I'm basically, my goal is to take people who are as dumb as me and make them better than the top people in those CS classes. And the ironic thing is, in the last 20 years, I probably coded more than everyone in my CS class combined. Okay, I saw some questions flowing through here, but I don't even know how to use Zoom enough to be able to figure out what everyone asked. If there's anything that I
think you accidentally muted yourself, Brian, when you were swiping.
So, Brian,
Technical difficulties, guys. Trying to think ways to lay it on the iPad.
At the left lower part of the screen, there is a mute button.
Oh, sorry. I am so sorry.
No worries.
I'm also very bad at using Zoom. I was so focused on getting the chat thing working. Oh, how do you deal with imposter syndrome while in college? Yeah, I've read up on imposter syndrome recently. For me, imposter syndrome is sort of like okay. I'm gonna answer this from a Chinese Asian American context. Okay, you're forced to play the piano, blah blah. You play it really well, although I don't play the piano, but you play it, and then you're supposed to, and everyone says, "Oh, you did very well." You're supposed to say, "No, I didn't do very well." False humility and imposter syndrome are one and one. They're two sides of the same coin. You're still focusing too much on yourself. So for me, the way I deal with it personally is I go, God, what makes me different? I'm in Brazil right now from that homeless kid that I walk by every day, who is also made in your image. There's really no difference, okay? Everything I have, I've received, so I cannot boast about it. So I'm just gonna put my head down. I'm not gonna care what other people think about me. I'm just going to do my best. And then stop thinking about yourself and just move on.
Great. Thank you.
I think
Brian, I'm conscious that is there one more question?
we have just
Sure.
one more question in the chat. How did you
Yeah.
find the transition
Okay.
in the Liferay project open source in the beginning? What challenges did you experience?
Oh, I think what people don't realize in the open source community is you have to do everything yourself. You can't like, oh, put this up and expect this magical community to get around it to like make it work. No, you got to be the one to push. And what ends up happening is once people see that there's momentum and there's push, then other people follow and then they push it forward. You just can't, and you can't be discouraged when other people don't do stuff. So what I did back then was I put a logo. I had to make the logo. I do the front end. I do the back end. I do everything. And then I realized people still didn't want to invest in this project because they thought it was a one-man show. So what I did was I just asked a bunch of my friends and I said, hey, do you want to be a part of this project? Some of them weren't even computer people. And they said, yes, I want to be a part of the project. So it was true. Okay. So I said, can I use your photo? And they said, yes. So I just put a bunch of photos of people who, and then people thought, oh, wow, there's more people involved in this project. Okay, they'll invest more. And then once that becomes true, because more people are involved, then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So you just got to do things yourself and you just got to push. You got to be like a heart. Boom, boom, boom. Whether you're happy or not, you're still just working. Boom, boom, boom. Just chug at it. Don't be discouraged. Let people say whatever they want about you. Just ignore it. Just go boom, boom, boom. That's the main thing.
Thanks, Brian. I think that's all of our questions that we've had. So thank you again. I definitely think the talk was very interesting and relatable. I could definitely relate to many of the elements that you spoke about, and I think a lot would put a lot of students at ease. So thank you again. Our next speaker is Zeno Roca, our Chief Product Officer at Liferay Cloud. He is also the writer of the book 14 Habits of Highly Productive Developers, and he will speak on how you can become a productive developer. I will pass it over to you now, Zeno.
Okay, thank you so much, Megan. I'm super happy to be here, and I'm also going to speak from my heart today. However, I do have slides, so I hopefully this is not boring, and I will try to keep this entertaining for you all. So yeah, this is it. Can you see my screen? All good? Thumbs up? Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to talk about 7 habits of highly productive developers today. I'm originally from Brazil. I moved to Los Angeles, California 6 years ago. And now like I'm speaking to you. Some of you are in Ireland, some of you are in Brazil, some of you are like everywhere in many different countries. So I'm super happy to be here today speaking to you. And yeah, however, there's one thing in this talk that is going to be different than usual talks. I'm actually going to tell you a lie. There's going to be a lie in this talk. I just want to be upfront about that, okay? So this was me in 2009. I just got into the university, and they do these kinds of things in Brazil where they do like weird stuff and silly stuff when you join. And I'm the one that is looking like Superman, although I hate Superman. I'm a big Batman fan. I love Batman, and they did that just because I hated Superman. And I remember feeling like right when I joined that there were all these different paths that I could follow. I could just like become like one thing or another. But at the end of the day, I was lost in every single path. Like it seems like, okay, if I go in this direction, okay, I have no idea what's going to happen. If I go into this other direction, I also don't have any idea on what's going to happen. So it's really difficult, and it's a really sensitive moment in your life. So I completely, I can emphasize I can't emphasize enough how hard it is. And you all know that because you might feel that way, or you're feeling right now the same thing. So for me, the first habit that was really important is about looking for signals. Um, I remember like when I joined the university, there were people telling me that, hey, you have to work with front end and you have to learn React or Angular or NPM or Flutter or like whatever the framework is during that day. There were other people telling me, hey, you have to work with databases and you have to learn PostgreSQL or MongoDB. SQL is not is better than NoSQL. And then some people saying NoSQL is actually better than SQL. And you have all these doubts and you have no idea how to proceed, right? And then there are other people. I remember my dad saying like, hey, you have to work with backend. You need to learn Java or like uh, Ruby on Rails was getting super big. And then WordPress was a big thing on the PHP community. Then Django on the Python community, Sinatra in the Ruby community. You have all these different options and you never know what to do. Even like design could be something else. Like even if you are doing CS, there are all this different knowledge that is kind of related to computing in general, but they're not necessarily that way. And I had many friends that were learning Photoshop, they were learning Adobe Illustrator. Now you have Sketch, you have Figma. So there's so many different tools that you have to learn. And I remember like sitting on that chair, looking at those all those different professors that were coming in telling me about what I should learn and what I should focus on my life, and feeling completely lost. The feeling that I was having was the classic fear of missing out, where okay, I can focus in one thing, but then I'm missing all these other things in my life, and that's really tough. I had this one professor who has a really weird way of teaching things, and one weird way was that he didn't allow us to use any sort of IDE. So instead of using like, think about any IDE that you might be using, like Eclipse or JetBrains or Visual Studio Code or whatever text editor or IDE you use, he didn't allow that. He only allowed a text, like a regular notes app. So you had to type like your code without syntax highlighting, without anything. I was using Windows back then, so I had to open my notepad and then like write the whole code over there. So when I compiled or when I saved it and there was an issue, I didn't know where the issue was. So I had to debug like visually without any hints or anything like that. That was interesting because it taught me a lot of things and I had to learn all this by myself, right? And I learned that there's all these different things that we can always invest time on, but the basis, the fundamentals, they are what really matters. And if you have weak fundamentals, especially in this period of your life where you're just beginning, then it's going to be really hard for you to build up that structure, right? Yes, you can invest on frameworks, you can learn the hottest technologies that are right now, but those technologies are going to change. That's just the reality of our profession. Those things change all the time. So you have to really learn the fundamentals, because when those things change, and they will, you're not going to freak out. You're just going to adapt, learn this other thing based on what you already have established on your knowledge base. And one thing that I realized recently, actually, like I've been doing this for like 12 or 13 years almost right now. And I realized that instead of feeling that like have this FOMO, the fear of missing out, there's another side to this, which is the joy of missing out. So that's how I try to approach things today, where I don't stress too much about the things that I don't know. I'm actually happy about all the things that I already know. And even if you're just starting, even if you are an intern right now, there are many things that you already know. You just don't give enough importance because you already learned it. So that's really tricky. So the second habit is teaching equals learning. I really want to stress about this thing because it's so important. I remember in 2010, my first internship, I was working with Flash. The language was ActionScript 3. And Flash back then was so much better than the web, to be honest, because the web was really limited. And if you want to express yourself creatively, Flash was just the best tool ever. So you had like, you could do anything. Like you could do those crazy animations and pop-ups, like some really weird stuff and really bad patterns as well, but it was super powerful. But then came this one day where Steve Jobs wrote a letter saying that he's not supporting Flash on iOS devices anymore. And the whole industry collapsed. It was insane. Like imagine all these developers who knew Flash and they were investing all their careers on this platform. Now it was gone. So it was a big hit. And at the same time, HTML5 was getting more popular, more popular. And I realized that, okay, like I want to learn HTML5. This is the next big thing. So I want to understand it and I want to learn it. So I started to like use talks, just like what I'm doing right now, to learn about a subject. It's really counterintuitive because most people think that in order to give a talk, you must be an expert on that subject. While in my perspective, you actually can use a talk to learn about the thing yourself. And when you have to learn something by yourself and teach others, now there's a completely different set of things that you need to care about because you have to teach it and people will ask you questions. So I started giving these talks like at the university, like for 5 people, 3 people, like whenever I had a chance, I would do it. And then I saw this one event where the creator of PHP, Rasmus Lerdoff, he was going to speak there. And I saw that, I was like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. I was using WordPress back then. And I said, okay, I'm going to go to these events. And they had like a call for papers where you could submit a talk. And I still like, I really wanted to learn about HTML5. So I said, okay, I'm going to submit a talk about HTML5. And I remember this like so vividly. They have this form with a huge text area element where you had to describe your work experience. And I had zero, like none. There was no work experience at all. But I said, okay, I'm gonna just fill this out, and if they accept, that's cool. If they don't, it's a shame. But yeah, it doesn't matter. I'm just gonna submit a talk. I filled that out, and I had no expectations. And then couple of weeks later, they accepted the talk, and I started to freak out. Like giving a talk, like talking in public, it was completely scary for me. I was always an introvert. I'm still am, and it was really difficult. But then I had no like way out, right? I submitted the talk, they accepted, so now I had to go there, step in, and give the talk. And one thing led to the other. I gave that one talk, and then someone in the audience saw it, they liked it, they invited me to another event, and then I gave another talk at another event, and then just kept going. I started to work on those experiments with HTML5. This was my first experiment that I published. I had this friend who knew a lot about physics, and I knew a lot about HTML5 and JavaScript. So we started to build these weird things where like particles that you could change the settings and do that. So then those experiments was once again like a way for me to learn more about that language. They had no intention. There was like nothing uh, like behind them. It was just a way to learn. Then I started giving talks in other countries. I went to Argentina. Like people started to invite me to give interviews on like magazines, which was completely insane. And then I went to Germany, another continent. And then one day, the Google open source program, they invited me to their offices in Mountain View. And then I went there, and then it went crazy. Like I started like recording videos and all that stuff. And all of this because like one realization that I had was like whenever there's a new technology and a new thing in the market, it's almost like you have a race where everybody is starting at the same time. I always had this feeling where I want to be the best at whatever I do, right? So I said, okay, if I want to be the best Java developer, I'm starting like super late in this race. Like there are people who are doing this for 10, 15 years already. So it's going to take a lot of energy and I might never reach them because it's just like an uphill battle, right? But if there's a new technology and it's a completely new field, everybody's starting from the same point. So if I run fast enough, if I'm consistent enough, maybe I can arrive to the finish line in front of other people. Today, I realized that the race is never over. To be honest, like there's never a point where there's a finish line. So this concept doesn't exist. You're always learning new things. You're always just like getting challenged by other problems that you didn't even know existed. But still, that was really important for me to realize that, okay, if I do this right, maybe I can get to um, a good way, a good thing in my career. And that's what I realized, that I could learn by myself, and I could read all the articles, listen to all the podcasts, watch every single presentation on that subject, and I would get to one point. But by teaching others, by exposing myself to those situations, even here, right? It's not easy for me to be here. Like I have to like open the camera and be like vulnerable, and I could make mistakes, and now there are like lots of people watching me and it's being recorded. Oh my gosh, like you can freak out about all those things, right? But that's so nice because like when you expose yourself, when you try to teach others, actually who's learning, it's yourself. You're learning much more than you would if you just were learning by yourself. I really love this quote from Jeff Atwood. You probably know this guy. He's the creator of Stack Overflow, and he's the CEO of the Discourse, which is a forum platform. It's open source too, so it's awesome. So he said this: nobody ever changed anything by remaining quiet. And that's so true. Like I feel like as developers, as programmers, it's so easy for us to just like go to like our basement and work like crazy. Like you just like keep focused on your computer, you don't do anything, you're just programming all the time. But in reality, like if you think about all these leaders in the world, like the people that everybody praises, like okay, Elon Musk or like Bill Gates, like those guys, even though they were like super nerds, they put themselves out there and they were speaking their truths, right? So I really recommend you to step out of your comfort zone too, and try to also advocate for your own ideas and all that stuff. So Habit 3 is about building side projects. I feel like this is especially important when you are starting your career. I feel like side projects, they are a life-changing thing, to be honest. And there's this whole movement today where people they talk to you and they say all the time like, oh, you have to open your code, right? Open source is the best thing in the world, so you have to open your code. So they're like websites where you can put your GitHub username and then they create a whole resume based on your GitHub profile, which is crazy, right? John Razik, this is the guy who created jQuery, one of the most popular front-end frameworks ever created. And he tweeted this: when it comes to hiring, I'll take a GitHub commit log over a resume any day. So there's this pressure that you have to have this amazing GitHub profile and you have to invest on open source projects and all that stuff. But then what happens, right? In reality, we hear all that stuff and then we have a brilliant idea and we think that this idea is going to change the world and it's going to be awesome and everybody's going to love it, right? It always starts like this. And then you go to GitHub and you create a new repo. You like put your name out there, you start something new. That's awesome. And then you start working like crazy. You like start committing every single day. You write this amazing README and you think it's going to be awesome, right? And then the expectation is that everyone is going to love your project. Everyone is going to admire you for what you have done. But in reality, this is what happens, right? 0 stars, 0 forks, and that's it. Nobody cares. And it's really tough to stand out nowadays because there's so many new open source projects being created every single day. But what I realized is that open source is not only GitHub. Open source existed before GitHub, It's going to exist after GitHub is not here anymore. But open source is a lifestyle. Like I could be just like going on with my life and not sharing the things that I learned, but I feel like I can live an open source life by sharing all those things and opening numbers and being vulnerable, right? And it's not only about code. I feel like open source, it's a much bigger thing. This is the first open source project that I created. It's called jQuery Boilerplate. I built in 2011. And it was such a nice experience because I created this website, just like Brian said before. Like, if you want your project to stand out, you have to create your own logo. Like, you have to do a little bit of marketing as well, which for some people, they hate even like mentioning that term, but that's just a reality, right? You have to do a little bit of that. And I remember just sharing on Twitter, and then I tagged like this huge site called Smashing Magazine. And I said, okay, I'm gonna try it out. I don't know if they're gonna really share this, but I messaged them and said, hey, can you share this link? Like, it's a new project I created. And they shared it, and it was so scary. Like, this tweet had like 70 retweets and 170 likes, and I was so scared by that. But at the same time, I was super happy. I was like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. People are sharing my project. Oh, I'm changing the world. That's so cool. And then I received this pull request. This is one of my first pull requests that I ever received in my life. And I want you to pay attention because this is what not to do, okay? So there was this guy. He was called Rick Waldron. He was a big influencer, like a big guy in the JavaScript community. He was doing bots with JavaScript. He was like super smart. And then he wrote me this pull request saying, everything is wrong, so delete all of it. This way you can start over and do it right. This was one of the first pull requests I received in my life. And the interesting thing about this is that even though I got super like ashamed, to be honest, like I thought I was doing something super cool, and turns out that no, like in terms of code quality and programming patterns, like all that stuff, no, I was doing something that was not good. And I was like super ashamed. I wanted to delete the project, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is so bad. But I ended up accepting that pull request, which was pretty much deleting all the files. And I started over again, and I kept improving. And this was the boilerplates, the template that people used for jQuery plugins. And it was a big thing back then. So open source and side projects for me are super important because they can unite your personal interests with the skills that you want to learn. So if you want to learn a new language, now you can use this side project as a way to learn a new language. If you want to expose yourself to a different industry, let's say, oh, the company that I work for, they only do B2B stuff. So I want to do B2C and do products for consumers instead of businesses. You can do that with a side project. So I feel like side projects, they open all these opportunities for you that are really nice and really interesting. But you have to put in the work, right? So it's not easy at all, but it's like a sandbox where you can learn a lot. Habit 4 is do it for your future self. What do I mean by that? I want to talk about another open source project that I made. It's called Clipboard.js. This one was a big hit, like had 30,000 stars on GitHub, and it was created in 2015. And once again was a project where when I did this, I was like really intentional about how I was going to launch it, how I was going to approach everything. And it ended up like being a big thing that year in 2015. Like Facebook launched React in that year. Apple launched the Swift language, which powers the iOS system today. TensorFlow is an AI tool, like big thing today. Material Design. Microsoft released Visual Studio Code that year as well. And GitHub, they made this chart about what were the projects that had the most stars in the first week. And among all those companies, Google, Apple, Facebook, Microsoft, like my name is over there, right? And I was super like happy and just like completely like, okay, like how does even happen in the first place, right? And it was all because like I was doing this for my future self. What do I mean by this? Even though you have amazing projects and people projects that you couldn't feel happier and prouder, uh, like there are always people that are going to hate whatever you do. This is a commit from like a random project that I found on GitHub saying back to using shitty clipboard.js, right? So here I am, like super happy that I'm building this thing, but then there are all these people that hate my project. And it's a really hard thing to see, right? You don't want to you want to help people, and then you end up sometimes not pleasing everyone. So and that's the same with coding, right? Sometimes we are like coding and we are just like, okay, our regular 9 to 5, or we're coding during the night, whatever the situation is. And we sometimes write a code that is not easy to understand. There are all these different layers on top of it, and it's just a mess, right? And I realized that code, whenever I see someone's code, I never approach it in a way that I'm judging that person. Like, I could go to Felipe's GitHub, and if I see something that is like weird, I would say, no, maybe because like Felipe was feeling stressed that day, right? Because I truly believe that code is the result of a specific situation, and it's never about the competence of someone, right? If you are working in a super stressful environment, if you have a boss that is super bad and treating you in a bad way, like all those things, they contribute to this, right? Let's say you lost your grandma that week. It's impossible for you to write good code in those circumstances. So it's really difficult. And this happens with us too, right? We write a code one day, like we say, oh, I'm writing this thing and it's amazing. And then 1 year later, we have to open that same file again. And then we look at this and we say, oh my gosh, who wrote this thing? This is so bad. And then you go to Git blame, you see like, okay, who wrote this line of code? And it was actually you, right? So it's super frustrating when you see that the person who is writing bad code is yourself. And you realize that, oh my gosh, why did I do this? But that's just the reality, right? So that's why we have to do things for our future selves. When we do things for our current selves, we like our current selves, we have all the context necessary. We know everything about the project. We know every single use case, every single business logic. 1 year later, 2 years later, 3 years later, you're not going to know all this. You don't have that context anymore. You're a different person. You had other problems and other things that you learned. So it's really important to always do things for your future self, because in that way, you're optimizing not only for you, but also for others. I love this quote about Marcus Aurelius. He was an emperor in Rome, and he was a Stoic, right? I love Stoicism, and he wrote this quote, which I think it's really amazing, right? Waste no time arguing about what a good man should be. Be one, right? So instead of us like saying, oh, I hate this guy because he writes bad code. Oh, I hate this girl because she's so bossy and all that stuff. Like, don't spend time with that kind of thing, because at the end of the day, just try to do your best yourself. There are probably tons of things that you have to improve. So just focus on that. Focus on doing things for your future self. The habit 5 is about estimating. In fact, I think you shouldn't be underestimating. I remember there was this one professor at the university who was really like an influential person to me as well. And there was one day, like randomly, he came to the room, and then he asked like, okay, what is the size of this mountain A over here? So this is a mountain in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. So he said like, what is the size of that? And he asked like everybody in the class. And we were like, I don't know. Like, I have no idea, right? I've never been there. Like, I can Google it if you want, but I don't know the size. He said, no Googling. tell me what is the size of this mountain. And like nobody knew the answer, right? So he said, okay, when you don't know, what do? You start guessing. So, okay, some people would say, oh, 300 meters or 3,000 meters, 2,000 meters. So everybody started guessing, right? And then he said, yeah, it's close to this one. Okay, I don't remember the number, but okay, it's close to this one. And then he came and asked another question. Okay, what is the size of this other mountain with like grass on top of it? And then everybody once again was like, okay, I have no idea. Like I'd never been there, I don't know. And he said, okay, if you don't know, what do? You guess. You do you give me another number. So people started guessing, but now they had a reference. You see, like far away, you see that mountain A. Now you can compare mountain B with mountain A, and now you can give a better estimate based on the number that you already know. This was really important for me to understand because if we don't estimate things, we never really know what one thing or another will take. And we have to learn from our past experiences. That's the only way to learn estimates. The truth is, like when we are estimating stuff, we always think about like the tip of the iceberg, right? Only the things that we see, but there are all these other things that we forget about estimates. And why are we so bad at estimates? Actually, for the past 3 weekly meetings that I had with Brian, I told him like, oh, this is going to be ready next week. This is going to be ready next week. And it was never was. So I'm still super bad at estimates too. But why are we so bad at it, estimates, right? The answer is because we only look at the engineering parts. We only look at coding and we estimate based on that. And sometimes we estimate based on our skills. We think about, okay, how much time would I take to do this? But in reality, like sometimes you're not actually doing it. Someone else in your team who's actually doing that stuff. And you have all the testing, the meetings, planning. You have to compile your code, run on the CI, document the code, debug problems that you didn't expect before. So there are all these different things that surround us when we're coding. And it's so difficult, so hard to estimate, but you only learn it by doing it. The habit 6 is about joining the dark side. So I always thought that coding was the light side, right? The good guys. So software engineers were always the good guys. We are the ones who care about the quality of the code. We are the ones who actually make stuff. We build the stuff. And then there are all these salespeople who don't know what they're talking, and they go there, they sell the stuff, they make all these empty promises. They don't care about the quality of my code. And I always hated that. And I always thought about them as the dark side, right? But now, years later, I have a completely different view of that situation, right? There was one year where I was traveling a lot, giving lots of talks. I gave like more than 100 talks already. And I was going to Germany and like just going and giving a talk over there. And then I had to go to Spain. And during that flight, I started to feel really sick. So like I had this huge pain and I had to like, there was one point in the flight where I had to like call for help. I said, hey, I called the flight attendant and said, hey, I'm really, really sick. I need to go to like an emergency. So we are like, imagine like we're traveling from one country to the other. I started to feel sick. When we landed, like nobody left the airplane. Like they took me in an ambulance. I went to the hospital. This was my first time in Spain. I didn't know how to speak Spanish. They took me to the hospital, and I was like, okay, I was already feeling good, and okay, maybe I'm gonna leave right now. And then they said, no, you're not leaving. You have to go to like you're gonna stay here. And I thought, oh my gosh, okay. So I stayed in the hospital. I didn't even tell my family because I thought it was going to be like 3 hours, 6 hours, something like this. And it actually turned out that I spent 3 weeks in that hospital back in 2013. It was a crazy experience in my life. But there was one point when I was there that like I had nothing to do, right? It was 3 days in, and I talked to my coworkers in Spain and I said, hey, can you go to the hotel, grab my laptop, because that way I can at least do something here. It's so boring to be in this hospital. Like I can't watch TV even, it's all in Spanish. So can you bring my laptop? And I was working over there on my laptop. And then one day I left my room, I grabbed some water. And then when I got back, like someone stole my laptop. So imagine how crazy this is. You are in a hospital and someone steals you. It's so insane. It's like unbelievable. So I cried like a baby. Like that. This was the only way that I could talk to my family. So it was a really hard situation. But then next day, like I talked to my coworkers, they brought a new computer, and you know how it is when you get a new machine, right? A new computer, you have to set up everything. So I downloaded my code editor, I downloaded my terminal emulator. So I started downloading all the apps that I use. And I had this feeling like I want to standardize my environment. I don't want to have my text editor with one color scheme and then my terminal with another color scheme. So I want to have a unified experience because I truly believe that there's a cost associated to changing context, right? So I started working on this project and I started working on my color scheme for my code, my text editor. So I did that, and then I did for my terminal, and then I did for like Vim and other apps, and I made all this open source, right? And I called this project Dracula. So I built this thing, and then I just kept improving. Like, okay, it's an open source project, no big deal. And then there's one day where this was in December 2019, and I wanted to learn more about sales because at Liferay, we were growing and we are like just having like bigger deals and more stuff. So I said, okay, I want to be a better salesperson. How can I do that? Well, I started to think and I bought like 10 books about business and sales and all that stuff. I ended up reading just like one, to be honest. And I thought to myself, like, how did I learn everything in my life? I wanted to learn JavaScript. I wanted to learn HTML, CSS, like everything that I learned in my life, I always learned with side projects. That's just how the way I operate. Like I get a side project and I use that as a sandbox, as a way for me to learn something. So I said, okay, I'm going to do the same thing, but I'm going to do with my side project, Dracula. So I made Dracula Pro. So I put this out there and I said, okay, I'm going to charge $49 for this thing. So this was February last year. So 1 year and 1 month ago. And I launched this thing. So I did this and I said, okay, let's see how it goes. The project started to grow. People started to buy that thing. And today, this is, I got that data yesterday. This is the number of sales since February 2020 until now, March 2021. And it sold more than $120,000. So imagine this. Imagine how crazy that is, right? Oops. So imagine how crazy this is, right? You're building something and now people start buying that thing that you built, which is already an insane thing, right? You are not, you're just like putting something out there and people are buying. Like I still have my job, right? I work at Liferay. I love working here, but I got all these extra income from a project that I had no idea that was going to work out. I was like just doing something for fun, doing something to learn more about a subject. And now there's all these things. And that got me thinking like, why as developers are we so against sales and marketing? Like we hate those terms. Like even me saying those things right now, like I have this feeling inside of me that says like, oh, this is wrong, right? Selling is wrong. Like all those things are wrong. But that's not the reality, right? That's what we need to survive. So I realized that like if you get all the developers in the world and you look at all these different people who are graduating and doing boot camps every single day, like in the beginning, like knowing how to code was the differentiator, right? If you knew how to code among like society, like you were a superhero. That's not the case anymore. lots of people know how to code already. So what is going to differentiate you from other people is how you understand the business side. So this is a really tricky subject, and it takes many years for you to understand it. Maybe you're watching this and you're thinking, oh, this guy, like, he's just saying those things, like, but he doesn't really understand. I actually just love coding, whatever. I don't care about it. And that's totally fine. I would probably have the same reaction if I was you. But there's a lot of things that comes when you make that effort to understand the business, because at the end of the day, there's someone like paying you your salary, right? So you have to do some sort of reverse engineering to understand how is that money getting to my bank account every month. That somehow that money is arriving to my bank account. So how is that happening? So once you understand that whole machine, now you're much better equipped, and you can transcend code, right? The last habit is about stop waiting. I often see and I often hear people, friends of mine, coming to me and saying like, "Oh, I have this amazing idea," or "Oh, my job sucks. I hate my boss. I hate my company. I need to leave," or uh, "I hate this country. I hate this city, this town that I live in. I need to move." And I always hear those things, and I totally understand. It's, as human beings, we're never happy with our current state. There are always things that we want to improve. But the problem with saying those things is what happens after that phrase, right? We always say, "Oh, but I don't have time to execute this new idea. But I don't have money to live this job. Like, I have all these bills to pay. Like, what's gonna happen?" Or I'm afraid of moving to another country. I don't know the language, and that's the barrier that I have today. And what I think about this is that yes, all those things, they are true, and you're totally right. Right, there are barriers that you have to deal with, but you also have to think about, if you truly want to make this happen, you have to start breaking down. And as a developer, you have to think just like when you're coding, you have this huge problem in front of you, and now you're breaking the logic in different pieces. You have to do the same with those types of problems, right? So if you want to invest an idea, like, what are you doing right now? Like, have you already launched your project? If it's an open source project, did you just push the code on GitHub, or did you also like invest time doing like building a README, thinking about all the installation steps, just like Brian said? How is your installation flow? Is it a 1 minute thing, or is it 20 minutes to install it? Like, how can you make that faster? How can you decrease um, the adoption curve, right? You always want to like build things that are going to make it easier for people to consume. Like, how are you approaching the business side of things? Like, there are all these questions that you need to ask yourself if you want to invest in an idea. If you want to change jobs, okay, what are the job positions that you want to be working on? What are the companies? How many have you applied? How many no's have you received? 1, 2, 10, 30, you know? So like, nothing should stop you. Like, if you want to, let's say, I want to work at Google, or I want to work at Amazon, or I want to work Facebook, like those big companies, right? This is something that everybody that who are leaving university, they feel like that they want to work on those big places. So if you want to do that, how many times have you applied for that? How many no's have you received? What are you like learning and reading so you can achieve that? So just start mapping, start breaking down your problems. If you want to move to another country, it's super hard, but you have to again break down like, what are the countries that you want to live? Do you want to live in the US? Do you want to live in Canada? Do you want to live like in Europe? What are the different laws on those countries? What are the different types of visa? In the US, you have H1B, you have L1. What is the difference between them? You have O1. Like, you have to start learning those things. You start to have you need to start mapping the cities that you want to live, the states. Like, there are all these things that you can do. And I truly believe that the only thing that prevents you from achieving something is yourself, right? Yes, we all have different circumstances in life, and it's really difficult to leave one state, right? it's easy for me to say, oh yeah, you can do anything, right? Like the only thing that's stopping you is yourself. But like maybe I don't have all the life circumstances that you had, but I also had plenty of those in my life, right? My family was poor too. I came from a poor country. Somehow I found a way to get out of there. And I'm sure you have your own struggles, your own demons that you have to fight, things that are internal, that are not necessarily external. And it's really, really difficult. I completely understand. But at the same time, I would like challenge you to reflect about this and see, okay, if I want to make those changes, what are the things that I can do? What are the things that are in my power to change? And you can do those things next week. You can do those things tomorrow, next month, or you can do those things now. So it's up to you, right? Okay, so now to wrap up, I said that I was going to say, I was going to tell you a lie in this presentation. And the lie is that there are not only 7 habits. I actually talked to people from like many different companies, from New York Times, Adobe, Citibank, Shopify, GitHub, Amazon, Google, like all these friends that I have. And I asked them, what makes a productive developer? And I put all these things in a book called 14 Habits of Highly Productive Developers. And that was the lie. They're not only 7, they're actually 14. And that's it. Like, I hope this talk was helpful in one way. I know it's really hard. Like, we are all inside our own bubbles right now. We're all at home and we have our own environments here. And it's really easy for us to stay in our comfort zone. But I would just challenge you, like, okay, what are the things that I can do to leave that bubble and go outside to where the magic happens? And thank you so much. This is my GitHub handle, Twitter handle, like if you want to reach out to me anytime. That's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Zeno. I'm not a developer, but I could definitely take some personal tips away from your talk. So I'm positive that many of our CS students found it even more beneficial. We actually got one question during your talk, if you have a quick minute to answer it.
Sure.
Let me find it again. So we have one question. Were you afraid? And she means like by a mistake that could have been fatal, like what's the risk of exposing yourself?
Yes. So I feel like we sometimes we feel like let's say giving a talk could like going up on the stage and exposing yourself, being vulnerable, those things are actually going to be bad for you. Like this story that I told you, now when I went to the hospital and I had to go through all that stuff, for many years I felt ashamed of that, and I felt that like, oh, sharing that, like this was the most horrible time in my whole life, right? From everything I ever experienced, like there was nothing more difficult than that. And I never wanted to be vulnerable and expose that. I thought that no, like this is so bad, like I don't want to do that. Maybe people are going to perceive me in a different way if I do this thing. But I often feel like when we are afraid of doing something, we often feel like it's going to have a more fatal result than the actual reality is, right? We feel like people are tracking our lives. They're saying, oh, this person, they did this, they did that, they did that, they did that. And that's not the reality. Like, people forget and they have no idea what you did. They don't, honestly, they don't care about you. They only care about themselves. Like everybody here, like everybody in this Zoom call with 62 people, like we all care about ourselves. Like mainly that's it, right? So I feel like those errors, like being vulnerable, is much less fatal than what we imagine in our minds. It's sometimes it's just like a mental block that we put in front of us.
Thank you. I definitely think I can relate to that. I will share that I was extremely nervous before hosting this webinar, even though it was my 3rd one. And Philippe beforehand was like, we've got 4 people in the waiting room. I was like, stop telling me, I don't need to know. But it's just natural. And I can definitely say that I have a script in front of me and I don't think I've stuck to it because you're paranoid. And I definitely think that you can get, I suppose, a little bit in your own head about things, but it's definitely the reward for after putting yourself out there is definitely always worthwhile.
Yeah, and it's crazy, right? Because I feel the same way. Like before this, I was like, oh my gosh, now like I'm doing this talk, Brian is gonna watch, and there are all these people. Like I'm afraid of being here too, right? But at the end of the day, when we leave this call and we end this Zoom meeting, I'm pretty sure that you, Megan, you're gonna feel like, oh, this was cool, this was nice. I'm glad I did it, right? That's what happens when we step out and we try new things. So usually the rewards are much bigger than if we just stayed. Okay, I could just watch Netflix instead, right? But no, I'm not doing that.
Thank you. No, definitely can relate. Well, I hope everyone enjoyed all of our speakers. I know I did, but it's not over yet. We're going to continue the informal chat in a panel discussion. So please add any questions that you might have into the chat. We've also prepared some questions for discussion as well. Brian and Zeno, you're welcome to join or drop off if you need. We will also be joined now by Niamh, Stefano and Philippe from our global services team here in Dublin. And I'm going to provide them with the opportunity to introduce themselves. So Philippe, you're the first one I can see on my camera. So if you want to start.
Sure. Hello, everyone. Yeah, so my name is Filipe Afonso. I'm originally from Lisbon in Portugal. I finished my computer science degree in 2006. So it was back then. I like to think it was yesterday, but no. So I've been in the market for a while. And I moved to Ireland 6 years ago, more or less, exactly to join Liferay. And that's been a really cool journey. So I'm looking forward to share some of my experiences with you guys.
Yeah, Niamh, go on ahead.
Okay, I'll go next. Hi everyone, my name is Niamh Niklava. I graduated back in 2009, so a little bit after Philippe. I did a degree in computer science and software engineering in Maynooth, and then I did a master's in electronic commerce in DCU. And since then, I worked as a graduate software developer for an Irish company called OpenJaw Technologies. And then I moved to Australia for a few years, and I moved back about a year and a half ago, and I've been working with Liferay as an engagement manager.
Thank you. Stefano.
Hi everyone, my name is Stefano Buzzuoli. I'm a part-time associate consultant on the global services team at Liferay in Dublin, Ireland. And I'm also in my final year of university in a computer applications and software engineering course in Dublin City University. I started off with Liferay back in March of 2020 as a consultant intern. And after a 6-month internship in which I learned so much, and in which I had a really smooth transition from the university to the workplace, I was then offered this part-time role as an associate consultant, which allowed me to continue working with Liferay, but while also finishing my university studies.
Thank you guys for the introductions. So someone more relevant to speak to you than myself. So I'm going to facilitate the discussion. So I'll keep an eye on the chat, but I'll also go ahead with the questions that we've prepared. So to you all, what do you think were the main issues or challenges that you faced when you were transitioning from university to the workforce or gaining that first employment after university?
Who wants to start?
You have the floor.
I can go first. Look, I think thinking back then, I think for me, the main challenge was to realize the impact of my actions and my work in other people's lives, you know, because I think, you know, when you are working on, you know, you are trying to finish your degree and you are working on your project, so you are coding away, you don't care about maintainability, or you don't care who is going to read your code other than your professor, maybe. So you don't think about those things. You don't have a customer that you need to make happy, or a product manager that you need to, you know, to support. So I think that was kind of the main challenge for me, was to realize the accountability of my actions and of my work, I would say.
I agree. Just add on to what Philippe said. I do think there's that kind of fear, maybe when moving from the university to the workplace, that maybe you can also maybe feel like your code quality will not be good enough, because I think there is a big difference, as Philippe mentioned, in the quality you need when writing code in university, in which your professor is maybe the only one seeing your code, and maybe that code is only verified to a certain extent, which maybe not, it's not tested or verified on different loads, on different circumstances, and with different end users. While with in the workplace, this is completely different, and you do have this expectation of higher quality because we do have customers to satisfy. So I think there's this fear that maybe you're not ready and maybe you're not good enough. But I do think that's more of a fear than what it actually is, because you also have a team that supports you, and slowly you do get to that level, which I think is one of the main fears. But I think it's actually doable, and your team is always there to help.
I agree with what Philippe and Stefano both said, but also I think when I went from university, where you have kind of clear deadlines of assignments needed to be done, and then when you're given a task in the workplace, sometimes because you're new and you don't really know what the expectations are, it's like, well, you know, how long am I supposed to take to complete this? What's the normal amount of time? You know, am I good enough? Is this too slow? You know, that kind of thing, as well as the quality aspect. And then also you don't want to be asking, if you've just started a new job, you don't want to be seen to be that person who's kind of constantly asking questions or annoying people. So yeah, that was one of the challenges that I found.
Yeah, and one thing as well, just to complement, to wrap up what I was saying, as well, is I think is a big difference as well is the relationships between people, you know, because you are working, when you join a company, you have like a long-term relationship with everyone that you are working with, so you can go cross projects, you know, you can obviously you have relationships with the customer, with managers, your team leads, but you also with your colleagues. Maybe in when you're doing your degree, you don't care about that much, because it's just, you know, isolated in time. So you have an assignment, you do that, you're good to go. Next class. But in the company, you will probably need to work for a good few years with that, you know, with that team, and so it's important that you learn how to, you know, deal with them and with everyone, and take care of these personal relationships. So for me, it was a big difference as well when I think back.
Yes, yeah, I agree completely with Philippe there, because I feel like the communication levels needed are really different, because maybe in a university context, often you're working on projects maybe individually, or even if you're working on group projects, maybe it's from 2 to 4, and often your group members can also be maybe your best friends. So I think that's really different from a workplace context, in which you might be working on a project with someone you maybe don't even know from a team in another country, in another office, and so I think that's another big difference.
Thank you, guys. We have no questions so far, so I'm going to keep going. So what solutions and approaches do you think helped you with this transition? He's kind of addressed it a little bit, though. That's what I'm kind of thinking. So
I can kind of add a bit to that, yeah, Megan. One thing I feel like really helped me before starting my internship with Liferay back in March of 2020 was kind of preparing for the role. Like through, like when applying to a job or even through the interview, I feel like you know more or less the technologies you might be using in a certain position. So I feel like what really helped me kind of going into this internship was preparing and maybe working on side projects, as even Zeno talked about earlier, or even taking some online courses, which got me familiar with a lot of these technologies. So when I did go into the internship, and of course Liferay had their own training program, but I was already familiar with a lot of the technologies aside from the Liferay specific ones, which I feel like made the transition a bit smoother.
I think one of the other things that I remember helping was validating kind of validating your approach or your thoughts with either your coworker or your boss. Because I know sometimes like that, you could spend a day or two digging into a problem and trying to figure something out by yourself. And then on the other side, you could be too scared to try something and asking, what should I do? Should I do this? Should I do that? Whereas if you kind of come up with the base idea and then validate that with your coworker or your boss, so it's like, this is what I'm planning to do, and I think it'll take me this long. Does that sound about right? And then if you're way off, then you'll get the direction early so you can kind of address it and fix it. But I think that goes back to, again, that communication and the relationships that you build with your team. But I think that definitely helps, and it kind of gives you the confidence as well, if you come up with your ideas, to know that you're not way off and you're doing the right thing.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And also in my case as well, I was trying to think, I want to be in a place, in an environment that allows me to do exactly what you were saying, Niamh, is that you are exposed to that learning opportunities. You are open to learn and continue, because sometimes you may think you just get your degree done and then you're good to go. But no, it's like need to be always learning, always looking for, to grow and be better. So I think that was kind of my focus when I started working in my company, in my first company in Portugal. And as well, because one of the things I said, from a development point of view, when you're coding on your projects, you don't realize, even with me saying this now, maybe you don't even realize completely what it means to work in a project, a big project, with several people contributing to it, that needs to be maintained over time, like maybe 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. And one thing that really helped me to realize that was when I had to work on this support project, something that was super old, that was running for years, and I had to help to fix bugs on that. It was a really cool experience, because then I realized, now I see what happens when I do bad code or when I don't follow best practices. So it helps to think about others that will need to maintain the code you are delivering. So definitely that helped me.
Great. And if you go back in time, what would you change? Your experiences or your transitions, or is there anything you would change?
One thing I would change is it's something very important, I think, and as I said, even Zeno mentioned it a few times earlier. I think what I do is maybe work more on side projects, because at least in Ireland, the way the university works is you get a 3-month break for every year. So you get the summer off. And one thing I would have done going back now is maybe I have worked on personal projects and side projects, but I would have done that to a greater extent, and maybe sometimes even make them group projects, work on these projects with my friends, because I do think that really helps a lot. As Zeno said, it really learn new technologies, new skills, and I think it's a really hands-on experience that really makes a difference.
100%. And I would add to that, and this may sound strange, but I'm going to share my feelings about it. I think if I would go back now, I would have enjoyed more the university times. I'm not saying, guys, stop studying and stop focusing and investing in being the best as you can. But thinking about my experience, I think I was too focused on getting good results and studying a lot, and I think I missed a bit those good times, so I would change that. I would just allow me to enjoy better those years, because they don't come back, and then you start working and it's the real deal.
Yeah, I don't think I'd have changed anything. Maybe that's because it's so far back I've forgotten. But I did get out and enjoy myself. So I don't regret that. But yeah, I think having, like Philippe was saying, having a balance is good, like making sure you do your work, but you don't obsess over it, and you enjoy your time at university. Although at the moment with COVID, I think that's pretty tricky.
It's not very fun.
Yeah.
I don't envy anyone. I feel like I shouldn't speak because I don't have much experience from a developer point of view, but I think I can come from a a transitional point of coming from university and doing a degree that I don't actually practice now. So I had a degree in finance, now I work in HR, slightly related, but not really. And then I'm trying to complete a master's part-time, but I think I can definitely relate to some of the aspects that Brian and Zena were talking about, like the bit of discouragement. And I kind of got in my head and decided with COVID, okay, I'm going to put it on a pause and I'll start it again in September. In the hopes that I might get a bit more of that uni life experience, but we'll see if that happens. And I will then take everyone's feedback on board and appreciate it. And I think also enjoy the balance of not putting too much pressure on myself, but then also realizing the aspects that we need to get in our journey of life, that I would call it. But it doesn't mean that we always end up doing what we study in college either, in case anyone has any of those fears. It can kind of work out, I think. I think it's working out all right so far. And would you have any advice or recommendations you would like to share with the students?
I think it's kind of echoing what Zeno was saying earlier. If something scares you, if someone, if an opportunity comes up, or if you get asked to do something and your initial impulse is, oh no, definitely not, I don't want to do that, it's probably a good idea to do it, because I think that is where you learn the most and where you get the best rewards. Anything that I've done, if there's ever an opportunity that's come up in my career or in university or outside of work, that, if I want to say no, I usually try to say yes, because I know that that's something that I'll get something out of.
Yeah, so I would say, so again, I kind of touched on that before. I think we covered that. But just make sure you are in an environment that you're happy, and surrounded with great people that can help you grow. Try to always be open to learn, asking for feedback, validating your ideas with your colleagues, managers, making sure you have someone to help you on that path as well. Try to keep it simple as well, and avoid getting too complex solutions for the problems you're trying to address. Avoid reinventing the wheel, and see what is out there. Again, talk with people and see where you can go and where it will lead you. But yeah, at the end of the day, be happy with what you are doing, I think.
Yeah, and to add a bit on to what Philippe said, there is don't be afraid to also ask questions. Maybe in your first job, in your internship, you might be struggling with a problem, and I think it's important to not be afraid to look like you're maybe not good enough to your team or your manager or so on, because sometimes there are challenges, and I feel like the team often understands that there are difficulties in the transition from the university to the workplace. So I think it's important to feel that comfortable enough to ask those questions when necessary. And I do know that my whole experience with Liferay has been remote. So I do understand that sometimes maybe when it is from a remote perspective, you can feel like messaging someone could be maybe disturbing them or annoying them or so on. But in my experience, at least, that was never the case. Their team is there to help. And I think it's really important to ask for that help or ask for feedback when working on certain problems.
Thank you, guys. Has anyone got any questions at all that they would like to ask before we conclude our session today? I'll give this a minute in case anyone wants to type anything. I'm just conscious of time, but I think that's it. Well, I want to thank you all for joining our webinar. I want to again extend our thank you to Zeno and Brian for sharing their stories and their talks today. I can't express enough how much I enjoyed it. I think from the comments, a lot of you enjoyed it as well. I hope you all walk away with some ease with the transition from the workforce from university to the workforce, or how you're currently performing at university. Also at Liferay, we're currently recruiting for permanent and internship roles. So check out our careers page for more information, or you can contact us directly. And I would like to wish you all a lovely evening. And if you are in your final year, I want to wish you all the best in your final exams. No matter your grades, the sky's the limit. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks all.
Thanks. Bye.